Alright, today we're going to talk about some special types of crosses. So we're going to be looking at something other than just the normal dominant and recessive that we've been talking about. And specifically, we're also going to talk about blood types and somewhat how they can determine paternity. Alright, so let's say we have a red flower and we have a white flower. Now, normally, with all the things we've been talking about so far, we would say, well, that's going to either equal a red flower or a white flower if I cross those two, depending on which one's dominant. But let's say that I do that and I end up with a pink flower. Well, that doesn't make any sense with what we've been talking about so far, and that's because this is a different type of dominance. It's not just one's dominant and one's recessive. And we call this incomplete dominance. And basically what is happening is the alleles are mixing together. So you can think of it as mixing, or you could think about it as they're halfway between. So for another example, if I have a dog with long hair and a dog with short hair and I cross those, some of the offspring might have medium length hair, if it's incomplete dominance. Alright, now because this is a different type of dominance, I'm going to write this in a different way so everybody knows that this is incomplete. So I'm going to say that the red one is big R, but instead of using little r's for the white flower, because it's not just recessive, I'm going to use primes, and those are what those apostrophes are. So the genotype for a white flower would be R prime, R prime. And then the genotype for a pink flower would be the heterozygous genotype, big R, R prime. So if you see those primes, it's mixing. It's incomplete dominance. I kind of like to think about it as the apostrophes like dotting the I in incomplete. So again, incomplete, mixing. Red plus white equals pink. And I use a different way of writing the genotypes. All right, now let's take, for example, a red cow and a white cow. Now, if this was incomplete, we'd end up with like a pink cow, which I personally have never seen a pink cow. However, I have seen a cow that has red and white spots. So obviously something different is going on here, because we can't get that if we have incomplete, and we can't get that if we have just regular dominant and recessive. In this case, we have what's called codominance. And in codominance, both the alleles show up because they're both dominant. I like to think about it as co-captains. So co-captains do everything together. They both show up to the coin toss. They both do all the different things. So codominance, they both show up. And again, in order to make sure everybody knows that we're talking about codominance, we're going to write this differently. We're going to say red is big R, and white, we're not going to use primes, we're not going to use lowercase letters, we're going to use an entirely different letter. And it's going to be capitalized because, again, they're both dominant. So if you ever see in a problem two different letters, we're talking about codominance. So again, in codominance, they both show up. Red and white would give you spots. And you see this in all kinds of things, especially with hair colors and fur colors and things like that. Things like Dalmatians, various types of flowers have spots. All of those things are codominants. Alright, now in some cases we have multiple alleles, where as you can see here we have brown, we have black, we have tan, we have white, so we have a whole bunch of different alleles, as opposed to just the two alleles that we've been looking at so far. Now, human blood type, we're going to combine a couple of these concepts, and this is why a lot of times people have problems with blood type, because we're going to have both multiple alleles and codominance. So blood types have three different alleles. We have an A, a B, and an O. A and B are going to be codominant, and O is just going to be regular recessive. Sometimes you will see them written this way, and so you need to kind of be able to go both ways. I think it's fairly obvious that IA and IB mean A and B. Alright, so let's look at how the genotypes and phenotypes match up. If I have two big A's, or an A and an O, because remember O is recessive, I can have a B and a B, B and an O, an A and a B, and two O's. Again, I can also write them this way. Now, big A, and big AO are both going to give me blood type A. A lot of people get confused here because genotypes and phenotypes both use a letter. So I recommend always just thinking to yourself, it's blood type A, that's a phenotype. 2 letters, that's going to be my genotype. Both of those genotypes are going to give me blood type B. AB is going to have its entirely different blood type because remember those are codominant. So in this case they both show up, different phenotype. And OO, that gives me O blood because again it's recessive, so I have to have both O's to give me blood type O. So let's do a real quick Punnett square dealing with blood types. Works the exact same way as anything else. I'm going to put the 2 alleles on the top and the sides, bring them down. So in this case, the possible phenotypes, I can get AB blood, B blood, A blood, and O blood. So for this one, I have 4 possible phenotypes. Now in many cases, I can actually rule out different parents based on blood type. So for example, if this individual had 2 B's instead of an O, you can't get blood type O and you can't get blood type A. So that's one of the ways that we can use it to determine paternity. Now we can't say for sure that this is or isn't the parent, but we can rule people out. Alright, so some key points from this. Remember, incomplete is mixing, and I write it with the R's and the R primes. Codominance means both, and I use 2 different capital letters. Blood types use 3 alleles, and A and B are codominant, so I can get that AB blood type. Alright, so that is the basics of these 2 different types of special crosses. Just remember, they are different, but they work the exact same way when we set up a Punnett square.